Hello, this is Anna Pacheco, SantaFe101.com. My guest today is Michael Coronado, and he's with Pinnacle Builders out in Doña Ana County. Michael, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Well, great. You know, I was referred over to you by Daniel Buck, who's working on a lot of interesting things in your area and also closer to the Texas border there in the southeast side of the state. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on, that you're connected with Daniel, and he said you're some interesting projects happening in Doña Ana. So let's get started. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on right now, even though, lumber prices are soaring and it's just kind of chaotic with the pandemic, but we seem to be growing at a phenomenal pace here in Doña Ana. So what I'm working on right now is we have a old restaurant. It's called La Union Station out in La Union, New Mexico, that they're going to renovate and bring back to life. I think it's been dormant for about 10 years now. So that's one thing that's in the on the burner. Then we're just doing various remodels and flips of homes in the historic district, working on old adobes, bringing them back to life, and then and selling them and regentrifying that downtown area.
You say downtown Las Cruces when you say downtown area.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, downtown Las Cruces. And that's kind of our main focus. And then we are looking at doing a container home project not too far from the downtown area here in Las Cruces. So we're starting to do some research on that, simply because lumber is it's just going through the roof, no pun intended. Lots of costs, lots of expense. So we're trying to eliminate that. And the container homes we can also put on piers or columns. It doesn't have to be, sorry, I'm out in the wind today, so a little windy coming in, but yeah, so the container homes we can save on concrete, and that's kind of the plans. How can we better use money and not have to spend it on lumber? So that's kind of the gist of where we are right now.
You know, I saw it's probably going on 4 or 5 years now. I think it was 60 Minutes. There was a whole series on using these. So they're like these shipping containers from these big freighter ships, right? And that's
correct.
Some guy, he was at Harvard or Yale, or he did his dissertation or something on it, and he created this whole business model where you could have living space in these containers. Is that what you're working on?
Yes, and really they're like big Legos. You can configure them in several different ways, or separate them and then build in between them an actual stick built. So yeah, then you don't have all the costs because it's already roofed. The walls are there, the floors are semi there. They'll need work, but there's just so many configurations you can do with them. You can build them up, I believe, up to six stories high, depending on their strength and how they are.
And just one storage unit, what is the height? I mean, how big is it inside? Like, is it 9, 10, 12 feet?
They're 8 foot tall. There's shorter ones, but we want the minimum of an 8 foot ceiling height.
But well, even 8 feet is kind of short, isn't it? Like I'm thinking about typical home, isn't a typical home about 10 to 12 feet?
Depending, yeah. I mean, 9, 10 foot, 12 foot ceiling heights. 8 foot's kind of a standard house. It's probably more of a apartment type of house, because apartments normally aren't going to have 10 foot or 9, 10 foot ceilings because they're more conservative.
And so these containers, they're made out of metal. Can you cut in them? Can you cut them?
Yes.
To another one?
Yes. And so that's the thing. So we can put windows in them indoors, or actually build them together and make it a bigger living area, because they're only, I think they're 8 to 9 foot wide also. So it's not a lot of width. So that's the thing that we're starting to research. How can we bring these things together, these container homes together, and configure them so that they flow, and so that people want to live there, that they feel comfortable.
And would that actually be more economical than saying getting a manufactured home?
I haven't really checked into cost of manufactured homes, but that's what we're looking into right now. We're starting to do the research and see if it is cost effective to do it. Now, the container homes we want to bring out of Mexico and rent, if not in Juarez, I'm looking into renting at the free trade zone, which is not US, not Mexico. It's right here on the border. So that's the next leg that we're going to look into and see what their recommendations and standards are of how we can make that work if we can.
And what about insulation? How would you insulate these homes?
I have an architect that I work with out of Guadalajara. So he's actually going to fly up here in about 2 weeks. And there's a project he did here in Las Cruces for Enchanted Sun Realty. And it's here on Loman Avenue in Las Cruces. And so he has all the, he's gone through the learning curve. So we're really going to pump him full of information and try to team up with him and find out about insulation. Now there is insulation, whether he sprayed it in or put bats or furred out the walls. I don't know. That's something that we're going to look at and see what costs are for the different ways of insulating.
And so you're saying that, like, as we speak, this gentleman in Guadalajara, are these types of homes, do they already exist in Guadalajara or other parts of the country or the world that you know of that have been successful?
Yes, there's actually some apartments in Phoenix. There's some in San Antonio, and I think they were in Dallas. I have a friend that's a consultant, and he travels nationwide and just consults for apartment buildings. And
putting it together, but I honestly wasn't interested at the time, and but now because of cost of lumber, we're in a new scenario of pricing. So that's why I decided to go ahead and take a look at it.
Well, you know, this I've heard from other people that lumber's up like 200%. Is it that high?
I think it's even more.
Really?
Yeah,
Could you speak up a little bit now, because our volume level has changed. I don't know if you could speak up a little. I can't hear you as well right now.
Sure. How about now? Is that better?
It's about the same, but let's keep trying. If you could just kind of consciously speak, speak higher than you normally would, just because I'm having a little trouble. But isn't the cost of lumber, doesn't it have something to do with, the COVID pandemic?
That's what we're being told, especially in Texas too, because they had that big freeze.
But this was going on. The freeze didn't happen. The freeze happened maybe a month ago. The cost of lumber has been going up way before that freeze.
Right, but the freeze exacerbated it because now there's so much lumber going to Texas, so it just made a bad situation even worse. So yes.
And is it because of the COVID? Have mills gone out of business, or they stopped just making lumber because people are sick, or they're just what's the reason behind it, do you think?
Well, what I was reading before, when Trump was still in office, of course, there was the trade wars, right, of lumber mills in Canada. So we're not getting the Canadian pricing like we were prior to tariffs and these tariff wars going on. So that brought up the price. And then the pandemic hit, of course. And again, so now mills didn't have the workforce to produce the same amount of lumber. And now they're making so much money. To me, it's like they have no incentive to hire more people because their profit margins are huge. So I think, that's kind of a little bit of it too.
And so that's kind of like the impetus for you to be doing this. And are you thinking of making these shipping container models into apartments or private homes?
Right now, we secured some land here in Las Cruces. That's for apartments. So yes, for apartments is our vision for now, but we really don't know where it might go. We might start doing some custom container homes down the road, pending cost and interest and sales.
And how large a apartment complex will it be if it all comes together?
I spoke with the city of Las Cruces this morning, pending how they can configure them on 1 acre of land, which is what the size of this property. They said we could tentatively build, I think, 50 to 60 units.
And so it would be going up, then it would be a vertical building.
Yes, we're going to probably do 2-story.
2-story.
Yes.
And you think you can, just in 2 stories, you can fit in 60 units in an acre of land?
Well, that's where we're going to start getting with the architects and the draftsmen and seeing what their design is, how big, how much space they're going to take, and how many we can get in there and have some green area too, because of COVID, we want some outdoor space also. So we're in the preliminary stages. And so that's kind of the stuff that we're going to start looking at.
And I know it's still preliminary, but what is your time frame? Do you think this apartment complex would be up beginning of 2023 or later in 2023?
I would think so, yes, because once we start to produce them and get that learning curve down, which our friend, his name's Santiago from Guadalajara, has, then it's just a matter of them producing them. And the plan is they do all the rough ins, it's called, the plumbing, electrical rough ins, cut out the windows, put windows in, and then we'll get them over here and do the finish out, which is drywall, paint, tile, if we go tile, the cosmetic stuff here.
And then what
So I
about a
think
foundation? Do they not, are they on any type of foundation?
you can put them on foundations, but that's one area we want to save cost on, is and just do columns or piers, they're called. So wherever the weight is bearing, then we can just do pillars and come and set them on there with a big crane. And of course, that'll all be engineered, and the engineers tell us how big the pillars have to be, how much steel, and then how high we can go up. And again, we're going to limit it at 2 stories.
Well, it
So-
sounds like a lot of work, and it's all because of the cost of lumber.
Pretty much. And I really think it's, we're moving into just different design and if you notice here in Las Cruces, and I think really in other areas that I've seen in the Southwest, architecture is becoming more straight and angular, just straight lines. We're not really going for the rounded soft curves anymore and sloped roofs. So that's kind of our footprint to look at also, is to try to do these things a little with a more futuristic architecture.
So the wave of the future, we're all going to be in shipping containers.
Well,
And so how
I'm
do you
gonna
find these containers? Do like these big shipping magnets, they say, you know what, we're going to retire 500 units because they're all rusty and yucky now, or do they make these brand new and they give them to you that way? Or how do you even find these shipping containers?
Well, and that's where, again, Santiago is going to come in. He already has a contacts. I think if it's not in Manzanillo, it's in Mazatlan, Mexico. I forget which one has, I think it's, if not the first, the second biggest port in Mexico. And you have a lot of containers coming across the ocean from China. And I think we only use them like 1 or 2 times, and then they're just there stacked up. So,
And why is that? Why do they not reuse them? Would you know?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
And I'm just
I'll-
curious, what would the cost of one of these be? Just the unit itself, without being cut with windows and insulation. What would just a raw container cost?
I'd have to check, but I heard it depends on the size, because there's different lengths also, but they were like about, I'm kind of guessing, to be honest with you, but I think they were like $2,500.
So if there's somebody out here, watching this interview right now that, they're a do-it-yourselfer, fixer-upper, they could maybe do something pretty modest on their own if they know what they're doing.
I would think so. You'd have to know how to weld. I think that's going to be one of the principal things, because once you start cutting into them, you start to mess with the integrity of the container, because you don't want it to flex. You want to keep the steel girder beams and the beams in there intact. So yeah, I mean, if they have some knowledge, then yes, they could make it work for sure.
And then I'm assuming that because they're like made of metal, there's not much of a fire risk, right? It's kind of like adobe. You can, the interior floor and stuff might burn because it's wood, but the actual
Right.
container is not going to go anywhere. I mean, the inside could burn up, but that's it.
Correct. And I think that too is going to be an insurance, a plus for insurance, for being able to insure the units. Because again,
Oh, that was my next, that's an interesting question. So like right now, I mean, I know here in Santa Fe, I've spoken to realtors, and some insurance companies won't give you homeowners insurance if you have like a wood burning stove, because they don't consider that like typical heating or something. Our insurance companies, are they open to this type of construction? Would they insure something like this?
That's something that I haven't looked at yet, but I would venture to say yes, simply because I know they are built in like Phoenix again, and in San Antonio and Dallas. And I believe there's even some here in El Paso that I'm trying to get my fingers on to go take a look at and see what they did here. So I would think they would be easier to insure, if anything, because again, they're going to be fireproof.
Right.
To an extent.
And so you're building an apartment complex in Las Cruces. Do you know right now, is there a shortage of apartments in Las Cruces? Do you know of?
I'd have to get with the realtor to see. I know that we're at capacity for homes. We don't have enough supply, and I'm hearing that the rents are also the same, because rents continue to increase here locally.
Well, I
So I
know
would
that
say,
you're a university town, the New Mexico State University is in Las Cruces. So there's always going to be a pretty steady rental market because of all the students and different professors that come and go. So, but I'm just curious to see if rentals were kind of, if there was an even flow or there was just, you need to build some more apartment complexes.
they just built a whole nother stack. I'm going to say at least probably 300 apartments next to the university.
Okay,
And
well, yeah,
there's
there's,
already, yeah, they just opened, they probably opened close to a year ago now. But I think you're right. And then we're growing. We're getting people coming in that Airbnb is just getting blown through the roof too. I
well,
mean,
and
they're
I think it's
filling in.
because I spoke to a realtor the other day and, your proximity to El Paso, you're not far from Tucson. You're the second largest city in New Mexico. You have better weather than we do up here in the north. So, and I think although it's getting expensive everywhere, I think it's still more reasonable in southern New Mexico in terms of the cost of a home. So that's probably, those are, and then again, you're a university town. I know a lot of retirees, they want to be in a town where there's a university because they want the intellectual stimulus that goes with it. So Daniel also mentioned to me that you're doing some kind of like, or hopefully down the road, some type of a project like a heritage project, like along the Camino Real, which was that historic trade route from Mexico City that ends 30 miles north of me here in Santa Fe. Something to do on the Camino Real. Can you speak to me about that project? I know you've got a lot of things going on, but can you talk to me a little bit about what that project entails?
Sure, that is that La Union station. It was a restaurant that used to be the hub, I guess. And I'm not from New Mexico originally. I'm from Washington State, but I guess back in its day, it was one of the stops, and uh, it was just kind of a major player in southern New Mexico. And again, it's getting dilapidated and falling down. So a couple that we did another restaurant build out for bought that property, and then COVID hit, of course, in the pandemic, so it got pushed to the back burner. But we've recently been in contact again, and they do want to get that La Union station up and running and make it a restaurant, craft brouhaha again.
And so it'll just be a restaurant. And so, and then like La Union, is it like, is it like out of the way or how are people going to hear about it?
Actually, it's in West. It's closer to West El Paso to Las Cruces. It's about 10 minutes away from West El Paso and Santa Teresa, which is just going bonkers in terms of growth because it's so close to the Mexico-U.S. border. And the growth in El Paso is phenomenal. So you get a lot of people from El Paso moving to Santa Teresa and buying homes, and they're about a 10-minute drive from that area. So I think they're
And
in a
Santa
pretty
Teresa is still in New Mexico though, right? It's New Mexico, it's
correct,
not Texas.
correct. But
Okay.
the border, the line's right there from Mexico, Texas, and New Mexico. So
So that,
it's all just, a 10-minute drive and you're in Texas, or you can be across the border in Mexico or in New Mexico.
so there's a lot of potential for growth just because of the proximity of the two states and our border with Mexico. So a little bit more about Pinnacle, because we're almost at the end of the interview. How long have you been building homes in Las Cruces?
We started building in 1998 doing rock walls. And we were actually up there in close to Albuquerque in Belen and Los Lunas, and started up there, and then started building homes since probably the early 2000s up to 2010. And then once we had the market crash in 2008, I just kind of, it was hard after that, after the crash in 2008, the housing crash. So we started doing more remodeling and stuff because that was always kind of consistent. And I found myself going down that path. And so that's what we're doing now, is we're buying older homes in the historic district here in Las Cruces, adobe homes, fixing them up and then flipping them, and then also doing remodels, adobe remodels, and just other remodels also. So that's kind of the niche we found.
And then what would the average cost of a remodeled adobe in historic Las Cruces run for if somebody's watching this? Because I think that'd be a really cool place to live. But
No,
what would something like that cost?
it depends on how much you can get the house for now, and the land. And again, it's all going up in price. So something today may not be the same tomorrow. I did a house on Las Cruces and Cord Street. We sold that for 140 a square foot was the sales price. So And honestly, I didn't make a lot of money on that, but what the good thing was is I bought 2 homes on one lot, split them off, and that profit pretty much paid for the next house. And that's when we're working on now. So that's kind of where my profit.
Is it reasonable? Is it safe to say that like for maybe $300,000, you know, of course, everything changes, every day changes, the size of the house, the size of the lot, but could somebody maybe get an old Adobe remodel for 300,000 in Las Cruces?
Yes, and I think even less than that.
Well, see,
Depending on the
that is great news. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I'm running down there tomorrow. It's really, you
And
can't
it
find
depends on
you
the
can't
size of
find
the house.
anything in Santa Fe, you know.
Oh,
But
I can
listen,
imagine.
you know, I appreciate your time, and I know you were such a sweetheart to do the interview in your car, because I know you're a builder and you're not sitting in a comfy office like I am with a nice background. So I really appreciate you you know, going the extra mile by doing this in your car right now. Best of luck to you with these. You know, what I'd like to do is, you know, maybe 6 months from now, have you back on this program to talk about, you know, where you are with these. And so what are they called again? They're called shipping unit homes, or what's the terminology?
Yeah, and you know, we just call them shipping containers because that's what they are. They're containers that merchandise gets shipped across the ocean, across the Pacific, and then they just store them. They warehouse them.
Right. Well, we're gonna have to come up with a catchy name for those instead of shipping containers. But listen, is there anything
I'm
you want
with
to
you.
end with? Do you want to say any parting words?
Just that we're having a beautiful, windy, typical spring windy day in New Mexico. We're getting like 55-mile-an-hour gusts
In
today.
southern
So
New Mexico.
southern New Mexico,
We don't
yes.
get it as bad usually up here, right? Well, you know, I'm going to have all your contact details posted along with this interview so people will know how to reach you. Michael Coronado, Pinnacle Builders, I do thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.